The little rocket ship from Elite Aerosports, the Picaro 2.0, aka the Picarito, begins now. If you missed the unboxing of this beautiful gem, there's a build list down below that starts from the very beginning of the unboxing and has all of the build videos of this aircraft. Really looking forward to putting this one together. This is brand new from Elite Aerosports, and it is going to be an absolute hit of an aircraft. All right, and as per usual, we're doing things a little bit different here. We are overpowering this plane way more than is recommended, so I don't suggest doing what we're doing, but the owner wants it done that way, so let's make it happen. So because of that, we've got some special things happening to this aircraft. And as per usual, we'll take a look at all the parts we're putting inside. So first thing we're doing is we're putting a Chikoi 195 turbine in this aircraft. This is going to be bananas. And of course, this aircraft will be piloted with the Jetty DS24. And we are doing the Bluetooth single battery setup on this aircraft. Now I know this is very controversial. Lots of people don't agree with this, but we have a giant fleet of aircraft, not necessarily my own, but all over the place, that operate off of one battery, and it works perfectly. So stick around for that. That'll of course come through the entire assembly process. If you don't agree with it, that's too bad for you. It works amazing. So we have a upgraded pipe from Joe Tamez Jet Pipes. This was one of the last pipes that he created, and very thankful to have this pipe for this aircraft. One of the last messages he sent to me before he passed away was this thing is built for up to a 250 size engine. The inner wall is insanely thick, so that contributes to it. But typical jet pipe fashion, beautiful workmanship. What a gem for this aircraft. We've got all of the stock hardware here as well. We will be modifying some of that stuff to suit the larger turbine setup. Now, one of the running changes on this aircraft you may find if you're ordering one of these is Elite Aerosports may go to a double horn setup. Right now ours only has a single horn, so we do have another set of horns that we'll be installing for a double horn setup on all the surfaces. All of our servos for the aircraft are MKS 9930s, and then we've got a 1220 steering servo. Of course, it's getting a Cortex gyro. Now, as far as the Jetty equipment goes, we've got a few things going on here. The first thing is the SBEC 30, and this takes the turbine battery, which is a 3-cell LiPo, regulates it down to 8.4 volts or whatever we set it to. So the radio system gets a constant 8.4 volts. So this is going to be powering all the electronics on the aircraft, including the landing gear. Jetty receiver setup. So we've got a Rex 12 as our primary receiver. We've got a Rex 7, which is our clone receiver. We've got a R3, which is our on-off. And we've got a M-speed sensor that's going to be mounted in the nose for airspeed. The UAT in this aircraft is going to be a Flight Composite Tech UAT. Very soon on our website, you will see the FCT lineup listed on our website for purchase. So thank you to Salim at FCT. He makes beautiful products. We met in Jet Power, had a chance to get everything sorted out. I'm really excited to have the FCT lineup of UATs here in the shop. Very nice quality stuff. I've got a 100 milliliter UAT from FCT that I will be installing in my Rebel Hot coming up, and you'll see a lot more of those being used in the future. And of course, the standard Electron retracts. So we've got a set of ER40s that are going in this aircraft. This is the standard setup for the Picaro. Wing tube sitting here, carbon wing tube is standard. Now the aircraft comes with very nice covers, the standard foil covers. We will be getting a set of wing bags for this aircraft. Those of course are from Revit as well, and they've already got the dimensions and everything for the Picaro 2.0. So you can either reach out to Revit or you can reach out to us if you're interested in ordering Revit products. So that is the starting point. We've looked at all the equipment. First step that we always start with, we've got to get all of our Jetty products updated, and we have to get our new model set up in the radio so we can get things moving forward. Now, while we do the new model setup, we're going to open up our servos, get these things going in the burn-in process. That's a standard here at the shop. We put these servos through 990 cycles. I'll show you more on that in the future here in a little bit, but we're going to get that going so we can get our radio equipment set up as well. All right, so we got our initial setup done here. So this is basically exactly how it's going to be laid out in the aircraft. So we've got our Rex 12 as our primary. We have made sure we programmed all of our channels. The first 6 need to be our gyro controlled channels. So we've got elevator, elevator, aileron, aileron, rudder, nose wheel, and those ports or control surfaces will come into the Cortex itself. So our Rex 12, our E1 and E2 ports right now are both set to EX bus. E1 comes out to port B on Cortex, and we've gone through our programming setup for this. All right, so first step, we've got the aircraft on our bench now, and we need to start disassembling everything. So the Picaro is a little bit of an interesting aircraft because you've got all of this stuff all kind of put into place and not easy to remove all this stuff. So the tanks are obviously conformal tanks on each side. We've got our intakes. So first thing I did was take apart the joiner piece right there, wrote a little arrow on the underside so we know which way that mounts. And then I'm going to split the fuselage now. We had the fuselage joined together just for unboxing and taking pictures and everything. And so anyways, we've got, I think, 3 bolts holding the fuselage together. So we're going to get that split and get this part disassembled, and we will see what our next steps are once that's done. All right, so these intakes are very difficult to get out. There's the top 2 fasteners, there is the back fasteners, and then you also have tank fasteners right here to make the tanks loose. So it's definitely tricky, and you kind of have to just slide the intake out like this and kind of squish it down. So it's interesting, cool system, but this exposes the fuel system. So we've got 2 saddles and the belly tank. Now I don't know if the belly tank is supposed to be used for smoke, but because we're putting a 195 in this aircraft, I'm pretty sure we're going to have both of those saddles go to this tank, and then this tank is going to go to the UAT, and then the fuel pump's going to pull from the UAT, because we'll definitely benefit from having as much fuel volume as possible. All right, so these 2 fasteners hold the center tank in, and it's got a very nice engagement system here with the back portion of the tank clipping into the little wing tube standoffs right there. Great system, I think that's awesome. So center tank here, if I had to guess, that's probably about maybe a liter. And then the saddle tanks, there's our 2 fasteners back here. And with those undone, I'm sure these will just pop out. And they don't just pop out, I think you've got to undo the bung fitting first, maybe. So, man, everything's very tight in here, but well thought out. Oh, maybe they come out of there, I'm not sure. Anyways, I'm going to play with that, get those 2 tanks out. All right, so we've got our fuselage pieces split here, intakes and tanks and everything set aside. So we're going to start off with the back end of our aircraft like normal. So we do have those double control arms to install, but we're going to install those, I think, as we work through these surfaces. And primary reason is just to make sure we get them installed on the correct side. Obviously something like the rudder here, it pretty much has to go on this side, but when you're dealing with like the elevators, you've got a couple options. So first thing we're going to do in this case is we're going to pull the stock pipe out of the aircraft. Now the stock pipe is just visually, I can see it's substantially smaller than the pipe that we have for the larger engine. So for a normal size engine that you'd put in this, this plane, like a 100 to 130 size engine, awesome. So just 3 fasteners holding that in. So we'll undo those 3 fasteners, pull it out, and take a look at the differences between the 2 pipes. All right, so here's the two pipes side by side. Dimension-wise, it's the stock pipe is nice and thick actually. It's about 85 millimeters, I think, on the diameter. The new pipe that we have here is 90, so not a huge difference, but obviously you can't go much bigger. And part of the reason you can't go crazy big is you've got the horizontal stab tube coming across there, so you have to be mindful of the pipe contacting that tube, and the aftermarket pipe that we have basically maxes out those dimensions completely. So yeah, so anyways, that pipe is the replacement. That's the stock one. You can see the second wall here comes back a little bit further as well. So anyways, that is the differences there. The new pipe, we will have to sand out the back end of the aircraft here, open this this pipe support former up, probably a few millimeters all the way around, but that's a shot from the back end here. It's also nice at this point to just inspect everything and kind of see what's going on back here. So we got a nice carbon reinforcement, lots of carbon structure holding all of the surfaces in place. And things are looking good back here. So we're going to pull these surfaces off next, so our vertical and horizontal stabs, and we'll start working on those guys. All right, so back end time here on the aircraft. We've got all of our parts separated out here, and our surfaces are all laid out. So we got a bunch of things to do. First thing I'm going to do is with the horizontal stabs. Now guys, please keep in mind as I work through this aircraft that the additions and changes and extra things that I'm doing are absolutely not needed. I am not suggesting that if you're putting a normal size engine in this plane that you need to do any of the things that I'm doing. I'm just merely sharing with you what this process is and those little extra additions that we're going to do to be able to deal with the larger engine. So as we work through this entire plane assembly, keep those things in mind, please. Okay, so our elevator scenario here is basically the standard kind of setup. You've got your carbon tube going through and the fixing bolts that keep everything in place. We're going to go one step further on this, and we are going to put a fastener on the anti-rotation pin. So it's going to end up a lot like the Super Bandit up there, which that one as well. Obviously old BVM kit, but you essentially have a fastener on the leading edge anti-rotation pin. So what happens when these surfaces are installed and the plane's going really fast is the carbon rod is back here, and you can get this gap opening up a little bit. It's pretty tough. Like if we put these surfaces all together or take that horizontal stab and like jam it backwards, you'll see it opens up, and that's normal for any plane. So what I'm going to do is this little space on the underside of the receiver portion, I'm going to fill that in with wood and high sol. Now that tube comes to about here, so we're going to fill that entire area in, and then what we're going to do with everything installed is we're going to drill and tap right into this anti-rotation pin. So when we're done, there's going to be a 3mm screw just like this guy that goes all the way through and keeps this anti-rotation pin from separating from the fuselage. So the owner doesn't take the horizontal stabs off, so it's not a real issue, but if somebody was to purchase this plane later on and they want to take the horizontal stabs off on a regular basis, instead of just undoing one screw here, they're also undoing a screw in the bottom of the fuselage. So what that looks like is the receiver portions at the end of my finger there, and we're just going to fill that space with wood on the underside and a whole bunch of high sol, get it all nicely filled in, and that'll allow us to drill that out. All right guys, so I got a couple pieces of ply shaved down and fit to the underside of our anti-rotation pins. So I'm going to mix up a bunch of aero epoxy, get those guys glued in place, and then once they're done, we will be able to drill through those and make some additional supports as discussed. There's the other side there. So I'm going to get those glued in, and then we will start working on our surfaces. All right, so we've got our pieces glued in place there. You can see on both sides, so we'll let that cure till tomorrow. Okay, so we're working on our elevator servos here, and we have a bad mamma jamma setup. So I'm using some of the MKS massive arms and the hubs, the 6mm hubs. So one of the things that's important when you're building a 300 mile per hour plane, like this one's gonna be, you gotta think of as much as you possibly can, zero movement, as strong as possible, as stiff as possible, and that's our goal here. Okay, so one other thing to think about is when we got this set up here with our Cortex and Rex 12, we don't actually need to plug anything into the Cortex right now, so we can just take that and set it aside because all of our outputs on the Rex 12 are currently set up as the first 6 channels. So when you do this, channels 1 through 6 is the channels we have allocated, and then they also match up with 1 to 6 on the Cortex. Now after the fact, if you were to need these channels to do, or these outputs to do something else, you can go in and program port number 1 to be function 18 as an example. So that's why this ends up being access to 18-ish channels. So we're going to set that Cortex aside. We can just power on the Rex 12 and we can plug these into the designated ports that we need in that receiver. All right, so getting ready to install our left servo into our left horizontal stab. Now this is all set up. One of the things I love about these hubs is that you can get the hub installed, just slip the arm through, install it on the hub, and then get all of the fastener bolts installed. So great system, like it, and obviously they're very, very strong. So the other benefit with the hubs is there's so many different angles and stuff that you can always find the one where it's perfectly perpendicular to the servo itself. So we've got that all centered out, which is great. And in the horizontal stab, there's a little pocket right there on the left-hand side of the screen, and that's where the servo lead comes through. So we're just gonna tuck that servo lead through the pocket and get that installed. Now these servo leads, we will install a little bit of snake skin over top of them and cut this guy down and put an ash lock connector on it, a locking connector as well for each of the stabs. So we've got all of the double horns glued into the surfaces for the back end. When I glued these, I made sure that I put tape around the perimeter, glued them. Once you've screwed them down, of course, the one that's already glued in gets everything matched up perfectly. So as far as getting double horns glued in, this is just about as easy as it gets. If you didn't have either of these horns installed, then it would be a nightmare. So yeah, this makes it a lot easier. It's just getting it fit and adjusted and everything. So anyways, those are all done. We're gonna let those cure till tomorrow, and then we can get our actual servos and surfaces all set up. But that is lovely. All right, it is the next day, and all of our gluing that we got done yesterday is good. So our elevator double horns are good, and our pieces of wood that we put in the fuselage are also good. So a couple things that we need to get done here. First thing is our sanding. So all of our surfaces on these this plane has little notches cut out for the control horn to go into. And of course, since we added a double horn here, we need to get rid of a little bit more material. So we're going to do that with our Dremel, and then we're going to get our linkages set up and centered. Now when we do this, we're going to get these linkages set up, get them sized and everything. Once that's done, we're going to take one of these linkages off and get a piece of carbon glued onto each of these rods. I'll explain that a little bit further, but quite simple, and I'll show you guys how I get that finished. All right, so we've got our left elevator plugged into our receiver setup here, and we've got our linkage installed on our arm. We're not using the outboard hole, we're using the inboard hole, and we are ready to do our carbon rod. So what I do in this case is I take a piece of carbon. I'll use this clear tube as an example. Simply hold it up here, mark it with a paint marker, and always go just a little bit too big, and then I make sure that it fits in there. Take the linkage apart, mix up some aero epoxy, get that installed, glue this guy on, do the linkage back up, and of course we confirm that our surface is centered again. So great way to strengthen up these linkages, especially for 300 mile per hour Picarito. All right, so our elevators and rudder are complete and they are rock solid. So absolutely zero play in this system. There's nothing. So that is great. That's exactly what we're looking for. Carbon rods have been installed. We used high sol underneath the carbon rods. So we have an insanely accurate and stiff setup now, which is wonderful. Bomb-proof. This is the type of thing that I used on my BDX aircraft, my big BDX here. That's exactly the same setup that we use on this aircraft. So the big, huge honking horns, the ball joints and everything, and it is so rock solid, it's very nice. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get our elevator addition here drilled out and completed. So that is our fastening system for the elevator. And what I'm gonna do is probably install our elevators first, our horizontal stab surfaces, and then we are going to drill those guys out. I'll probably mark that first so we have a clear point as to where the zero is, or the center part of the anti-rotation pin. And yeah, then we'll get that drilled out and tapped. All right, so we have drilled out the 2 holes. Then I installed the horizontal stabs, and now I'm going to re-drill those holes, and we're going to drill into the aluminum pin that is the leading edge pin of the horizontal stab. So once we've drilled those out, I'm going to take my 3mm tap, and we're going to tap those guys out completely. So when we put a screw in there, it's going to go into our wood, into the aluminum anti-rotation pin, and prevent these horizontal stabs from having any movement at all. All right, so we've got our extra additional anti-rotation fasteners complete. Those are just 3mm Allen key bolts that ensure they go all the way into the anti-rotation pin. So that's done. We do need to do our connector still, along with our connector for the vertical stab or rudder. So we're gonna get those things started. All right, so we've got our rudder connection done here. Now I like to use Ashlock connectors in case you're not familiar. So we've got both sides of the Ashlock connector, and in this case we're using the 3-pin connector. I like to have this portion on the removable surface and this portion mounted inside the fuselage. So I've marked out where I want that to be. We'll just make a little Dremel slot and our connector just slides in there. We can glue that in place. And that's basically going to sit right in this area just like that. So we'll do exactly the same thing on our 2 horizontal stabs. And one other thing that I've done here for the vertical is here's our carbon tube, and you can see it's a little bit shiny compared to the ends. So it was a little bit loose in the surface and a little bit loose in the fuselage. So I find often if it's just slightly loose, one layer of heavy duty packing tape works really well. Now this isn't like super thin cheap packing tape. This is nice Scotch brand packing tape. I know it sounds kind of goofy, but there is different types of packing tape, and we've gone all the way around except there's about 2mm exposed there. And if you look at this now, it slips in there nice and solid, and there's zero play. Previously we had a little bit of play in there, you know, 1mm or so, and that just helps take care of all of the play in the surface and on the fuselage portion. All right, in our wire connections here, I'll just show you how we're doing them for the back end. So we've got our Ashlock connector, piece of shrink tube, snake skin all the way to the front portion of the wire, and that's how all of our back end wires are going to be run. All right, so we've got both of our connectors done up for our horizontal stabs. So I just glue those in place with a little bit of CA, make a nice slot for them. They fit in beautifully. And we've got our leads run inside the rear part of the fuselage. And then our actual surfaces have snakeskin, clip, and shrink tube installed as well. So as we assemble this, we're going to Loctite everything because the tail end really never comes off. And if it does need to come off, obviously it still can, but it's going to get put together for the last time. All right, here's a shot of the tail section before we put the horizontal stabs on. So our servo lead comes like this, bends, and then clips in. So that stays out of the way of the actual servo arm moving. It's nice and flexed out here, obviously covered in snakeskin as well. We've got the threaded hole there in our anti-rotation pin, and that's where the bolt fits through. Great positioning on that, about halfway on the anti-rotation pin. So great setup on the tail end. I'm very happy with the way this turned out. All right, so with back end surfaces complete, it's now time to start fitting the pipe into the back end. So first thing we're going to do is open this guy up a little bit with a Dremel and a drum sander. Now the fortunate thing is when you're installing the pipe like this, you can basically just install it from the back end here, just to test fit it and make sure that it goes through. And we've only got that one former, I think, to open up before the pipe will fit through. The rest of it should fit through just fine. Pretty sure the bell mouths are identical here, so that bell mouth is likely just going to fit right in, and we'll have those tabs go right in the same location as the stock ones. So it should be a pretty easy fit. I'm just going to take a little bit off at a time with this back end. So I'll get one of the little drums installed on my Dremel and just take about 2 millimeters off all the way around. Now one thing you can do with that is take a paint marker or a Sharpie and just put a line here. And what this helps to do is control the amount that you're taking away. So in this case, we're just going to make the color disappear. And when we do that, that will be a couple millimeters off on all of them. All right, so we got our pipe fit. We're going to pull this back out now just so we can put some CA on the screw holes, but pipe fits really good. And had to open up the former in the back there, and we almost completely got rid of the original tabs. So I just took my Dremel bit and opened up the original little pockets some more as well to create some air movement in there, but pipe fits wonderful. So when we pull this pipe back out, we're also going to get our wires fastened to the side and get them run. They're all going to come out of this pocket right here. All right, so we got all of our lines run in the back end there. I used some of the plastic clips that we use, and we put a little bit of shoe goop around each of the clips to make sure that if the adhesive on the clip lets go, the shoe goop keeps it in place. So those are run, and we're ready to reinstall our pipe for the last time. All right, pipe's installed, back end is now done, ready to join to the front end, but we're not ready to join to the front end. We still have some more work to do. So first thing we're going to do here is get our turbine rails, pipe, spacing and everything figured out, and that needs to be done because you have very limited access to the turbine mounting area. Now when you're dealing with a big bell mouth like this, you want to measure the bell mouth. So I've already measured it, but from the front of the silver pipe to the end of the bell mouth, so this distance is 60 millimeters. So we want the end of our turbine to sit in 30 millimeters, so half the distance inside the big bell mouth. About that much of our cone is going to be mounted inside the bell mouth. So what that means is when we mount this turbine in the front part of the fuselage, we're going to have about 30 millimeters of that cone sticking out of the fuselage, and that'll give us the right spacing. So now one of the things we need to do with our turbine is get our rails trimmed just a little bit. So if you look at this turbine, you can see that the rails are a little bit too close together for this size of turbine. I think the smaller Chicoid turbine, like a 160 or a 132, would fit in there and just drop in, but of course the 195 is a little bit wider. So we have to take a little bit of our turbine rails off to make sure that this turbine will just drop right in place. So if we go like that and center everything, we can see that we need to take probably 3 millimeters off of each side, and that should be a reasonable space to get that mounted, maybe a little bit. We don't want to go all the way to this edge right there. That would be too much. We want to kind of do about half that distance of that little angled piece there, I think would be ideal. So Anyways, and the amount that our turbine is going to be sticking out of the fuselage, just so we have an idea, is about something like that. So we don't really need to trim the entire turbine rail all the way to the front, just about half that that distance that's of that piece that's spaced out. So anyways, I'm going to work on that, get that stuff sorted out. We are also painting the front part of our fuselage, the inside. We're going to just paint it black, so that'll be all black, no speckles or anything. So, but I want to get the turbine mounted and set up before we do the painting and before we join the fuselage pieces together.
Okay guys, so what we need to do now is focus on taking the fuselage apart and mounting the turbine.
So definitely the biggest struggle so far with this aircraft is going to be getting that engine installed. Now I think if you went with a smaller engine, you're going to have a little bit better access. So that's something to keep in mind, but otherwise the aircraft looks very straightforward, but that's a bit of a struggle for sure. But that's what comes with a design where everything's packed in so tightly, fortunately and unfortunately. Just want to give a plug here for our Lighter Side of RC After Dark channel. That's a completely separate channel. We do live streams here from the shop. Typically every 2 weeks is kind of the normal winter schedule. So we're back into the normal schedule now. So it's tons of fun. We get to interact with you guys if you're on during the live. You get to ask us questions and we're there. I mean, you're here with us, so it's pretty cool. So I really enjoy it. The other thing is thank you to you channel members. Channel members get to see our videos early. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and we really appreciate it. It means a ton, so thank you. So that, my friends, wraps up video number 1 in the series of putting together the Picaro 2-meter aircraft. We are going to continue on in the next video, getting the fuselage painted, and we're going to move into the wing assembly as well. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to list them down below. Keep an eye out for video number 2. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button down below, and we'll see you in the next video.